Hello friends and welcome to Generation Pixel, and today we're going to be talking about games that ate my soul! Okay, nothing quite as dramatic as that, but I'm going to be talking about games that I spent at least 500 hours in and possibly even more, so stay tuned. Now, the only fair way I could think of doing this was to do it chronologically. That's because not every game you play is going to have a handy hour counter. So for my first game, we will start with this. On the surface, playing Final Fantasy VII just through the main storyline has an average of about 26 to 27 hours. So, as you can see, it's quite easy to clock up over 500 hours just merely by playing the game once a year since its release. But for me, Final Fantasy VII devoured so much more time than that. As in all RPGs of its time and even today, yes, there was a multitude of side quests, but it was also much deeper than that. The game was also littered with a myriad mini-games, giving the player the opportunity to do things such as play video games for hours in Gold Saucer, or probably one of my favourite aspects of the game, hunting, breeding and racing Chocobo. And despite all the side quest shenanigans, there was also the main narrative, which yes, could be completed in under 30 hours. But for the player to truly get to grips with the multi-threaded narrative, well, that took a lot longer than 30 hours. And of course, if you fall in love with Final Fantasy VII, then you're going to play it again. It wasn't the first RPG I'd ever played, but it was definitely the first one that sucked me into its world and held on with an iron grip. And I don't think I could even calculate the number of hours I've spent in the presence of Cloud and Barret and Tifa and Aerith, Red, Vincent, Yuffie, Cait Sith and Cid. Now moving swiftly on, I'm going to bring you Suikoden and Suikoden 2 and mash them both together. The reason I'm going to do that is that back to back they make for one of the most massive role-playing experiences you could probably have and of immense quality. Now unlike Final Fantasy VII, Suikoden's main narrative thread isn't that complex, but where it lets itself down on complexity, it really makes up for in its vastness. And where it truly shines is in its stars. Its stars of destiny, that is, all 108 of them. That's right, 108 characters spread across the Suikoden world that you have to go out, find and recruit to your cause. And on top of that, yes, most of the 108 stars that you can collect are usable party members when you're out in the world, so yes, you can level them up. Most of them have their own unique skills and traits, and let me tell you, that really does add to the length of the game when you want to get not only all 108 stars, but to level them up to their maximum abilities as well. And even on the few characters that you can't take out into the world as part of a party, they tend to have their own side quests with mini games. And let me tell you, some of those were the most fun mini games I've ever experienced within an RPG. And I really don't want to talk too much about it because I'd much rather people went out and experienced this game for themselves. And if you've already experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the second game that ate my soul was most definitely Suikoden 1 and Suikoden 2. Now, not all of the games that ate my soul were RPGs. In fact, the third one was a third-person shooter by the name of Warhawk. And not only was it just a third-person shooter, it was an online multiplayer first-person shooter, which was a genre that I had never ever been interested in or dipped into, but there's other reasons for that, which will come later. But despite that, there was just something magical about Warhawk at the time. The gameplay was nothing special on its own. It had your traditional modes such as capture the flag or deathmatch that we had seen many times before in other titles. But there was just something about the fluidity of the game that once I'd sat down and started playing, I was happily sucked into that zone for, well, hours and hours at a time. And of course, as an RPG fan, the one thing that really did captivate me was the ranking system. You would start the game as a recruit and work your way through all the different ranks until you reach general. Well, if you could, that is. As for myself, I believe I made it to first lieutenant, which is not too bad considering this genre of game wasn't something I had a great deal of experience in. And casting my mind back, I think one of the things that really grabbed my attention with Warhawk was the ability to utilise different vehicles. You had, of course, the titular Warhawk, a high-powered jet that was incredibly hard to control, but completely OP if you did know how to fly the thing. On the ground, you had jeeps with mounted guns and tanks, and of course a host of different weapons you could pick up and utilise: rocket launchers, knives, sniper rifles, machine guns. You know, you get the gist. And I think all in all it was just a great fun game at a great time, and it gave me something that I didn't quite have in other games. So for, I would imagine, at least a year solid, Warhawk was my go-to game, at a time where I could maybe only get an hour of gaming at any one time. And it's the only game on this list that seems lost to time, and one I truly would love to see being brought back. So if anyone out there watching can do this, do it, please. For game number 4, I'm back to RPG, but this time not JRPG. And the game in question that ate my soul is one that has probably ate millions upon millions of other souls along its lifetime. And that game is none other than the phenomenal The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Now I really don't need to talk about Skyrim, probably not to anyone. Not to someone who plays RPGs, not to someone who only plays first person shooters, not to someone who only plays the sports games that are released every year. Everyone and their dog knows what Skyrim is. But of course we're here to talk about games that ate my soul. And of course I'm expected to give some sort of explanation as to why Skyrim ate my soul. Now was it the story? Not really. We've seen the story time and time again. Like I've said in the past, there is nothing new under the sun. And of course the gameplay wasn't new because The Elder Scrolls V suggests 4 other games before it. But what it did have, and what it still has, is a world that you can totally live in, especially with the expansions that came out later. Now I'm going to throw my hands up here and admit I have never completed the main storyline in Skyrim. I have invested thousands, probably thousands upon thousands of hours within the world of Skyrim without actually getting to the end of the game. And it's quite simply because I love the world so much that when I'm playing Skyrim, I'm merely living in that world. I will happily saunter about, doing side quests, investigating caverns, trying to climb mountains, or just simply build a house or get the resources together to furnish it. I can't think of another game that I have ever played where it is the world itself that I'm totally invested in. And I think most people who have played Skyrim have the same sort of experience. Well, people who continue to play Skyrim. Just God bless that game. Now game number 5, and I'm moving away from RPG again. So no JRPG, no regular RPG. And for the very first time in my almost 50 years on this planet, I turned to a first person shooter. Now as I hinted in game number 3, there was a reason that I didn't play shooters much, and this is the reason. First person shooters gave me motion sickness. And this is an ailment that I have suffered since 1996, when I first played Alien Trilogy on the original PlayStation. Now, it's not that I hadn't tried other first-person shooters as the years went on. I did, and every time the same circumstances. 30 minutes of gameplay, 30 minutes of head down the toilet bowl. Not a pretty sight, let me tell you. But for game number 5, something managed to sneak up on me and caught me totally by surprise. And that game was Destiny, or more precisely, Destiny the Taken King. Now, I don't know what magic Bungie worked, but for some reason, for the first time in 20 years, I could sit down and play a first-person shooter and not have to run for a basin. And let me tell you, it came at a time in my life where I was really grateful that I could have a game that I could invest so much time into without having to invest so much brain power in. Because way back in 2015, I required knee surgery, which had me laid up for about 6 months with nothing to do but sit on a couch and manage pain. And let me tell you, video games are a great tool for managing pain. Of course, combined with whatever medications your doctor's actually giving you. Though let me think, doctors prescribing video games for pain management. Let's get on to that. But anyway, back to Destiny, yeah. I don't know whether it was because of the novelty of being able to play a first-person shooter that I truly embraced the game. But I'll be fair on it, it looked fantastic. The story wasn't exactly great, not by the standards of someone who's used to playing RPGs on a regular basis. But the game mechanics were really tight, and I thought the loot system was fantastic. So having loot to collect and little story bits and pieces here and there, it was like an RPG light. But of course, first person shooter mechanics. And I'll always be grateful that Destiny came along at that time. And although we have Destiny 2 and it's still managing to put out expansions, it's never quite grabbed me the same way as The Taken King did. And I don't know if that's because I'm not really a first person shooter gamer, or the timing was just perfect for The Taken King. But whatever it was, I was glad. And for a solid year, I put in no less than 3 hours a day in that game. Every day. And of course, most days even more. So thank you Bungie for The Taken King, the first person shooter that cured my motion sickness. So that brings us to the end of the games that ate my soul. Now if anybody's watching this, firstly, thank you as always, and mention in the comments if there's games that you feel ate your soul. Or even mention if there's games that you've played that ate your soul that I should play so it can eat my soul too. But this is getting way too complex. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've watched, I've made videos before. I'm hopefully making videos in the future. Well, I know I'm going to make videos in the future, whether people watch or not. But anyway, for now, bye.